All right. So I had you submit your papers yesterday so that I could get a general sense of where the class is at. Feel free to unsubmit those. Again, the only reason you turned those in was so that I could see generally where we're at. I'm going to share with you some general comments. It would be in your best interest to write down what I say summary-wise and apply that to your own paper. Again, what I'm saying today are common problems. I think 3 common problems that are afflicting papers and how to fix those problems. After I get done with that, I'll have time to sit down with each of you specifically. If you'd like me to read your paper or spend some more time with you as a human being, feel free to put your name up here on the board, and I'll just go into them in the name that they're listed. So we get done talking, Meath's like, oh, I got specific questions for you, Lindenberg. Put down Meath, and then Allison puts hers up there, Ben, whatever, doesn't matter. But that's when you'll sign up to hang out with me individually during class. A couple other things before we get started. Number one, those of you who are in CIS history, this paper is due for you on Friday. Those of you who are writing this strictly AP Lang style, so you're writing about eyewitness testimony, that's going to be due for you on Monday. CIS people, Mr. Potter is going to go over in class how to write introductions and conclusions. Right now, you should be at or through analysis for 2 of your 3 body paragraphs. There's only 2 more things you need to do in each paragraph. So even though the deadline is coming up, the end of this bad boy is in sight as long as you've been keeping up in class. All right, so on to the 3 biggest problems afflicting your papers and how to fix those problems. Okay, so problem number 1 that's afflicting people is your topic sentences still do not have an argument in them. It is critical that you have a specific argument in your topic sentence. People who are making that mistake in CIS have topic sentences that just say, like, hey, here's this British soldier, and here's what he said. John Bateman, a British soldier, said the British shot first. A bad but little better topic sentence would be something like, John Bateman, a British soldier, is believable because he says the British shot first. If you're using that guy, what's the argument you're making? You're making an argument about bias. Guess what word needs to be front and center in your thesis statement? Bias. Okay, so you need to say something about bias in that topic sentence. A seemingly biased British soldier testifies that it was, in fact, the British who shot first at the Battle of Lexington Green. Or, because a seemingly biased British soldier says blank, it makes it likely that his testimony is believable. And so you need to have the word that's going to determine your argument front and center in your topic sentence. In AP Lit, that means that some of you are just saying something like, hey, visual working memory isn't reliable. That's not good enough because you're writing a paper that's arguing what? Whether or not eyewitness testimony is what? Should be used. So if you just have a topic sentence that's about how memory works, that's not good enough because you need to get that back to your argument of why eyewitness testimony should or should not be used. So you need to always bring it back to the idea of eyewitness being a good or a bad thing. Your topic sentences can't just be about memory. Does that make sense, one and all? Okay, so that's big issue number 1 and how you fix big issue number 1. Get the word that emphasizes your argument front and center in your paper. All right, big issue number 2 is that in your analysis, you need to bring it back to the how and why your quote frame proves your argument. So again, the math equation here. Analysis means you have to get the how and why, answer the questions, how and why your quote frame proves your argument. Where people are screwing up with this, it means that they're saying something like, hey, John Bateman's a British soldier. and he's biased, and so therefore when he says the colonials didn't shoot first, he's believable. Then I say, quote frame, John Bateman was a British soldier, so one would expect him to be biased towards the British cause. However, in his testimony, he speaks out against the British. Boom. Now I give his testimony. Okay, now I need to analyze why and how that testimony shows that he is not biased and shows that he is in fact believable. It's not good enough for me just to say, yeah, so because he said the British shot first, the British probably shot first. So the answering the how and why there means saying something to the effect of, John Bateman is actively speaking out against his own country. And for someone to speak out against their own country is a very challenging thing to do. And so therefore, he is speaking out against his identity. And because he's speaking out against his own self-interest, against his own bias, and against his own identity, that makes what he says believable. So I just verbally gave you an example of how and why that guy saying that proves that he is not biased and proves that it is likely that the British shot first. Does that check out? Okay. On this end of the spectrum, you have to say how and why this information about memory proves that eyewitness testimony should or should not be used. So it's not just good enough to say like, hey, when something is logged in long-term memory, that means that it's in there forever. So because long-term memory is useful, eyewitness testimony should be used. That's not makes eyewitness testimony a good or a bad thing. Same thing for like memories are stronger when they have an emotional connection to them, right? So when I'm talking about how that proves my argument, I would say something about how, crimes are oftentimes emotional moments in someone's life. You feel violated or you feel empathetic to watching this person that's having this crime committed against them. So because crimes are emotional events and because emotional events are stored in the long-term memory, eyewitness testimony should be used because we remember those emotional events well, and crimes are emotional events. That would be a good example of analysis there. Does that make sense? And this is hard to comprehend and wrap your head around. That's why you'll have a video that you consult. That's why you should be writing down this formula so that you can check your own paragraphs against this formula. The last thing that you'll need to start doing, and this is how you kind of bring your paragraphs to a close. So once you have your analysis and your analysis is good to go, then you need to present the other side. So you need to they say, I say a little bit here. So after I bring up my analysis, and let's just stick with this British guy for a moment, you need to present how they would respond to your argument. So this British guy, what point would somebody make that this British guy, you say he's believable, however, I say he's not believable? What would their argument be? He's a prisoner. And why does that make his argument less believable? And he would say whatever he needs to say so that he doesn't suffer any more than he already is going to, right? So down here, you need to summarize the opposite argument with an unbiased position. So you're going to summarize, Mr. Rybecki, what you just said. That's going to be done in a new paragraph. We're going to add little mini paragraphs to the end of each of our 3 body paragraphs. And in these mini paragraphs, you're going to they say, I say. Here's how people respond to this argument, and here's how I refute these people. Okay, so in order to get into that, you need to use complex sentence structure. So you're going to need to use a simple, like an intro word, like however, or you can use an intro phrase, like on the other hand, or although. Or you can use a coordinating conjunction like yet or but. But when you start doing this, your first sentence needs to do one of these three things. On the other hand, historians would argue that John Bateman is not believable because he's delivering his testimony under duress. And Bateman is a prisoner. And as a prisoner, he would likely say whatever it needs to be said in order to not die. So when he says that it was the British who shot first, he's only saying that because he wants to impress his colonial captors. Period. So I'm summarizing the opposition to my argument unbiasedly and in my own words. Same thing over here. You're talking about how crimes are emotional events. You could also say that it's a memory fact that we don't exactly know what memories get locked into long-term memory and what memories get wiped away right away. So because we don't know if this person is remembering something they actually saw or something they think they saw, eyewitness testimony is therefore not as reliable. Does that make sense, one and all? And so if you can, by the end of the day today, when you come back to class tomorrow, you want to have all of your paragraphs finished through analysis, and you want to have this refutation started for a couple of them. Tomorrow, we'll talk about how to respond to the refutation, and then you'll be done. That's paper. Got it? Is there anybody who desperately wants me to hang out with them right now and go over their stuff?
Sure.
Okay, I'll start with Strumke. Put your names on the board if you want me to come by and give you sage-like advice. You certainly can, Mr. Rybacki.